11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country. Here we go again, another Tory leadership election amid cries of "it's a stitch-up, we need a general election, bring back Boris," and all the rest of it. I have great guests who really do know what's going on. Plus, meltdown on the high street, and also, wherever it is, there it is. A lovely book about a pony. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Alastair. Good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The former Deputy Prime Minister says Rishi Sunak is the first to break the 100 MP threshold required to get on the leadership ballot. The former Chancellor has yet to formally launch his bid for number 10. Yesterday, Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, became the first to announce her campaign to replace Liz Truss. Those vying for the Tory party leadership will have to secure 100 nominations from the party's 357 MPs by Monday. Dominic Raab told GB News he thinks Mr Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is now back in the UK amid speculation he'll run for the leadership. Trade Minister Sir James Duddridge says Mr Johnson told him he's up for running. Well, earlier today, former newspaper editor Neil Wallace told us he thinks Boris Johnson might be more sensible to sit this election out.
The last thing the country needs at the moment is chaos. It needs stability. It doesn't need a complete new uproar, change. It needs calmness. And the danger always is with Boris Johnson, a great vote winner, a clever politician, but the danger is always he's going to come in and just do that.
The leader of the Scottish National Party says Scotland faces economic harm regardless of who the Conservatives choose as the new Prime Minister. Ian Blackford says Scottish independence is the only way to escape the threat of Tory cuts, soaring mortgage rates and record high inflation. His comments follow the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, calling for a general election after Ms Truss's resignation. 68 courts across England and Wales will be affected by staff striking today. Legal advisers and court associates, who are members of the Public and Commercial Services Union, will walk out for 9 days. The workers are locked in a dispute over a management system that their employer says is key to modernising the court system. Avanti West Coast managers are also striking today in the fourth day of walkouts for the train company this month. The RMT union says the timetable and operating hours will be significantly reduced, with one train an hour running from London to Manchester, Glasgow and Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned across other rail companies at the start of next month. Avanti is planning another strike on the 6th of November in an ongoing dispute over working conditions. Thousands of victims of infected blood scandal will receive a payment of £100,000 by the end of October. The Cabinet Office has said survivors and bereaved partners will receive letters this week confirming the money will be sent to them in the following 10 days. It follows a report by the Infected Blood Inquiry chairman in July that said the compensation should be paid without delay. Iran has condemned a UN probe into allegations its country's drones are being used to attack Ukraine. France, Germany and Britain called for the United Nations to investigate Russia's use of alleged Iranian-made drones. It follows claims from US intelligence that Iranian military trainers were in Crimea helping Russian forces operate drones to attack targets in Ukraine. Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's president is calling on Western nations to urge Russia not to blow up a dam that would see a large-scale disaster in southern Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is planning to blow up the Kakhovka Dam, which provides Russia with one of the few remaining routes across a river in the partially occupied Kherson region. Donald Trump has been ordered to testify under oath in the 6th of January Capitol riots investigation. The House of Representatives committee has sent a subpoena to the former president to provide documents. He needs to appear for his statement in mid-November and could face criminal charges if he does not comply. Italy's new leader has been officially sworn in and makes her the country's first female prime minister. Giorgia Meloni swept to victory in an election last month as part of a coalition that includes Forza Italia, led by former Premier Silvio Berlusconi. Meloni has stressed her administration would be firmly pro-NATO and pro-European. The new alliance is the first far-right-led government in Italy since the Second World War. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. Here we go again, is the glib way of putting it. Another resignation puts the leadership of the Conservative Party in play again, and of course with it the premiership of this country. But there's so much more to it than simply that. Enough already, many of you cry. Have done with it. Let's have a general election. And that takes us into the bizarre constitutionality of it all. Unless a swathe of disgruntled Tory MPs back the opposition in a vote of no confidence in the government, that ain't going to happen. Honked off they may be, but self-sabotaging, not so much. Post the 2019 general election, the Tories retain a majority in the House of Commons of around about 80. And with it, the right to govern so long as they can pick yet another leader who commands a majority in that House of Commons. So, game on. But with a cautionary note. In the leader column of the Times newspaper today, it says, unless whoever wins can rediscover strong and stable government, there should indeed be a general election, however that can be brought about. So today we're not only going to discuss the runners and riders in the Tory leadership, we're also going to discuss the craziness of the whole system. We're going to look at the impact it's all having on businesses, not least those trying to provide you and me with food and other essentials. We'll also find time to fit in and lift your spirits with a wonderful book that is quite simply about a naughty pony. And I think in the times we occupy right now, you need that. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So a life and a programme in balance, I trust. Joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is historian and political biographer Sir Anthony Selden, Marco Longi MP, who's backing Boris Johnson, Tim Montgomery, who set up Conservative Home, one of the most influential talk shops within the Conservative Party, and many others, not least the Conservative voices from Northern Ireland and from Wales. We, all of us, also want to hear from you. What do you make of it all? Is our system fit for purpose? Would you back any of the runners and riders? Do you agree with Trevor Kavanagh in the Sun newspaper, who says it's become the politics of I'm a celebrity, make me Prime Minister? Does the rethink need to go deeper in the Tory party than simply Rishi versus Boris versus Penny? Have the Tories lost their way? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Tweet at GB News or tweet me directly. And we'll be sharing some of your thoughts, and you've been on fire already, I can assure you. So let's get the conversation underway, and I'm delighted to say that joining me first is a regular on this programme, always welcome here, Marco Longi, who's the Conservative Member of Parliament for Dudley North and has confirmed his support for Boris Johnson. Indeed, you were an early backer for Boris, but I have to put it to you, your party's problems go far deeper than can be solved with a rerun of someone who quite recently was rejected by your party.
Good morning, Alastair, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show. I've always been a fan over a very long time. Yes, you are accurate in painting that description of the Conservative Party at the moment, and Boris will know exactly that this is the situation, and he has to be a unifying person and offering his, if you like, olive branch. And I know that might be a slightly clumsy way of putting this, but he has to be the unity candidate and the unity leader. And I do believe that his record will show that his way of campaigning amongst the people is that he's able to pull everyone together. So his ability to win in red wall seats, such as mine, that couldn't be more different than some of the leafy constituencies of Surrey or the Shires, that he's able to do that. He has proven that already once, something that no other candidate can do. He does have that electoral mandate that no other candidate can say they have. And that is the reason why I'm backing Boris.
OK, but for those of us listening to us on radio, we put pictures of him at the podium, and earlier in the news bulletin we saw him coming back from holiday, and you will know as well as I that he is damaged goods in the past, and even now he's getting serious flack from grown-up people for saying, well, the party was tearing itself apart and defenestrating Liz Truss. He was sunning himself with his family in the Caribbean. He wasn't even here. He wasn't in the House of Commons. He wasn't a participant. And you say he's a serious candidate and he's the unifying candidate.
Yes, that's right. And sometimes, because when you have that kind of presence, you don't want to be adding fuel to a fire that's burning rather intensely. I think it was the right thing for Boris to keep out any of that. And it was right for Boris to see if there was a call coming from not just MPs, but from the rest of the country to see if they wanted him back. Now, Boris has not declared yet, I should point out. It's many MPs like myself who are imploring him to come back in the interest of the nation. And for me, the main test is that of democracy. You know, I could have chosen to live anywhere in the world and perhaps decide to go into politics anywhere I wanted to. I do have an international background. And I can tell you, the profound connection that we have in this country between you, the voter, Alastair, and me, the politician, cannot be found anywhere else on the planet. These are foundations that were set from Magna Carta and that cannot be found really anywhere else. And every door I knock on, every street corner I turn and bump into people, by a very, very long margin, people are saying, we want Boris back. He was never given a chance. That is who I voted for. And we want now for Boris to come back and at least be given the chance, because he was never given a chance because of COVID, because of Ukraine, and because of how the blob went against him, the institutions and the establishment. He was never given a chance. So This is why I think he's right that Boris comes back, and I hope he does.
You talk about the respect for our system, a system that means that you and your party are clinging to a mandate that was achieved in 2019, albeit under the leadership of Boris Johnson. And the people I listen to on street corners, as you say, you hear lots of folks saying, bring back Boris. I see that on my social media feed as well. But the overwhelming instinct that I'm picking up is, let's have a general election. I just explained in my introduction that unless you guys vote for it, it's not going to happen. But don't you sense out there, honestly, from ordinary folk that they've had enough of this farrago? What Trevor Kavanagh says is, I'm a celebrity, make me Prime Minister.
Yes, I do. And I think that that is a fair comment as well. All I would say is that we have been through unprecedented times. You know, COVID wasn't in any party's manifesto. Boris had to respond to that. Government was pretty much paralysed for 18 months to 2 years. And then Boris did what he did with COVID. He responded as a statesman and led the Western Hemisphere against Putin and his act of aggression in Europe, in Ukraine. You know, all I would say is people will get a general election. It's just a case of when. And for me, Boris does deserve a chance, whatever is left in this term, give him a chance that was never really given to him, the chance that the people of this country want him to have by an overwhelming majority, certainly in my inbox and the people that I bump into and the people that you yourself recognise. So yes, there is a lot of frustration out there, but it's been MPs every time have come together to take away what the people want. They came together and tried to upset the whole referendum with Brexit. They tried it again in 2019. And every time with Boris, the people were able to have their voice heard. And this is what they are owed, is for their voice to be heard. And they are saying, bring back Boris.
Yeah, the last thing they did as well before we got to this stage was to get together to stop Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng cutting taxes and shrinking the size of the state. If you guys can't do that, what is the point of the Conservative Party?
Quite, and I agree, and I feel terribly sad for Liz and for Kwasi, because I do believe that their agenda for growth was the correct one. And I think some mistakes, as Liz herself acknowledged, were made in terms of how quickly and how deeply she moved without recognising that we've got this Gordon Brown type economic philosophy and policies that have pervaded the Treasury and the Bank of England since 2005, 2007. And it was just too much of a shock to a system. We should have perhaps planned it in a more staged way. But it's impossible for us to pretend that we're going to grow the economy in the same ways that we've tried to in the last 15 years, and quite frankly, not really delivered on. So,
all right, Marco Longi, as I said at the very beginning, genuinely a pleasure to talk to you. You're always very honest and upfront about it all, and I'm grateful. Look forward to welcoming you back on the programme whenever. Conservative Member of Parliament there for Dudley North, Marco Longi. Now, Tim Montgomery, as I said right at the beginning, is the founder of Conservative Home. He's also former advisor to Boris Johnson back in the day, and there he is joining me live now. I don't mean to sound childish or silly in this opening question, but it's bonkers, isn't it, what's going on within the Conservative Party? Utterly bonkers.
Yeah, well, you've got me on, Alastair, and I'm very grateful for you having me on your programme. I love our conversations, but I'm a political analyst. You could have had a pollster. You could have had various forms of journalists, but I wonder actually whether you should have a psychiatrist on, really, to diagnose what's going on in the Conservative Party. There's almost like a madness taking over the party that I support, I still support. And I think there's a lot of fear amongst Conservative MPs, frankly. We've had an opinion poll on GBNews yesterday, which had the Tories down to just 14%. And I think a lot of MPs who rationally would really probably accept normal circumstances that Boris Johnson's days really were over are in such a state of panic that they're almost willing to roll the dice again and embrace someone they know could be a disaster, but there has upside possibilities as well.
Biggest disaster in 40 years, says William Hague, who you also know extremely well, and lived through that last decade of doom and gloom that saw him as leader and Ian Duncan Smith as leader and goodness knows who else. I tell you, the standout piece for me in the newspapers this morning is Matt Goodwin, who knows a bit about politics and a bit about polling, who writes in the Telegraph that such are the travails of the Conservative Party that you may be about to pick the man or woman who will be the last ever Tory Prime Minister unless you get your party sorted out.
And I would have to agree with every word of that. And you know what? The first word, whoever the next Prime Minister is, when they stand on the steps of Downing Street, the word they must say, Alastair, before anything else, is sorry. You know, what the Conservative Party has put the country through in recent weeks probably does deserve ejection from office. But, you know, we had a report, for example, on child abuse a couple of days ago, a really important inquiry into the nature of child abuse in our country. And it was almost completely wiped off the media, almost got no attention, because that was the day that Liz Truss resigned. You know, we could all list things where the horrors that we've all been through in recent times. But after that word sorry, we need action. And what we need in action is quiet, competent, stable government. Or as you said, when you quoted the Times, Alastair, at the top of the programme, we will have to have a general election because the Conservative Party will have proven itself unable to govern in a way that the British people have a right to expect.
A final question to you, Tim, and it was interesting listening to Marco Longi just now, who said growth should be the agenda. I felt sorry that Liz and Kwasi's prescription was rejected, but it wasn't well thought through, it wasn't terribly well presented. My final question to him was, unless the Conservative Party is a party of smaller state, lower taxation, it is nothing. And it was under Boris Johnson's last leadership that saw those taxes rise, the state expand. There may be fine and reasonable explanations for it, but that's his banner, that's the slogan that's up there.
It is, but I would almost say there's even something more important than that, or at least as important as that, Alastair. And it's the party of law and order, of the nation state, of secure borders. And frankly, so long as people see people able to cross the channel, migrants, unstopped, if you see people being able to spray paint over car showrooms, stop traffic in the middle of London, cause chaos for people. Unless the Conservative Party gets a grip of that basic sense that there's a government in charge, not protesters, not migrants, that we are a country able to govern itself, which is, of course, what people voted for when they voted for Brexit. So, yes, we need economic stability, and good Jeremy Hunt's made an excellent start, but we need law and order and secure borders too. I'd put that as an equal priority.
Tim Montgomery, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Have a restful Saturday afternoon, what remains of it, and look forward to seeing you soon, I hope. Thank you very much indeed. Tim Montgomery, founder of Conservative Home and, as I say, former advisor to Boris Johnson. I bigged him up at the very beginning because it's always a genuine pleasure for me to talk to my next guest. Sitting, listening to all of that, importantly, here in the studio with me is Sir Anthony Selden. Anthony is the former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Buckingham, but also a renowned author of political biographies, including Margaret Thatcher, John Major and several others. He is also rightly known for his political acumen, and I can tell you that he's been on the phone ever since he arrived here, just keeping up to speed with everything that's going on. And I'd venture we've given you quite a treat already with a Tory MP backing Boris Johnson, saying that he genuinely believes that Boris Johnson can be a unifier of this party. And Tim Montgomery of Conservative Home saying, unless the party sorts out what it really believes in, its days are numbered as a serious political force.
Well, both are very worthy people, but I think they're both wrong. So let's deal first of all with Marco.
Marco Longi.
He's not a unifying candidate, is he? I mean, where does that come from? When you look at Charles Moore in The Telegraph today, who is a huge Brexit backer and a great believer in Boris Johnson, saying this is simply the wrong moment for him, because what's needed is somebody who has financial skill and who is able to cut spending. And Boris Johnson, above all, was about spend, spend, spend. His cabinet ministers, it was just a complete joke because they'd all go in there and he'd always say, oh, let's spend more, let's do this. He doesn't have a financial brain anywhere near him. He has many, many qualities, but as an economist, he's still in year one of primary school. But also William Hague, who has been leader of the Conservative Party, saying it would be the worst decision. So, I mean, that's why I'm just questioning that point of view about him being a unifying candidate. That's not what I'm seeing or hearing from leading commentators like Charles Moore and leading figures in the party like William Hague, arguably its greatest intellect.
But nearly all of them, including Charles, are for Rishi, and they're for Rishi because he rejected Trussonomics, but it was Trussonomics and Truss herself who the members of this once great party embraced, who are about to be told to stand quietly in the corner and not get in the way while the grown-ups get on with it.
Well, this is, Alastair, why it's confusing, isn't it? Because many people...
Less than confusing, isn't it, Anthony?
Well, it's certainly confusing and more, but let's just look at why it is. Because many people supported those ideas. Trussonomics, let's get public spending down, let's get taxes down, let's go for growth, are very important Tory points of view. They're what Margaret Thatcher had advocated 40 years ago with great success, resulting in 3 Tory general election victories, something that hadn't been seen for 160 years in the Tory party. But she was wrong in her timing. That's why it's confusing. Margaret Thatcher won her own general election victory that Liz Truss had never done, and she still bided her time. Not 2 weeks, but 2 years Margaret Thatcher waited. She realised that her predecessor, Ted Heath, had gone out all guns blazing on the trade unions and got into a terrible battle, as he had done on his free market policies. She bided her time, built allies, reassured the markets and launched it at the right moment. So it's very hard when the party likes, or many like the policies of Liz Truss, but now have the grief of seeing those policies now perhaps off the political agenda for 15 years till the Tories are back.
We've asked you to come back at 1 o'clock, where I want to talk more about the constitutional situation and this mandate that they are clinging to at the moment. But just on exactly that theme, and it is my final point, another very good writer, and you've got it there in the Telegraph, is Camilla Tominey, who says, where's the candidate for the right? Where's the candidate for those economics? Tim Montgomery's law and order, protection of borders. There isn't a runner or a rider who embraces all of that as things stand.
Well, I think that Penny Mordaunt is liked because she does she articulates other things too that some find uncongenial, but she does do that. But the question is there now the opportunity, with the economy the way it is, dire unions, strikes coming up, problems in the health service, is this the time to launch that? This is surely the time to try to minimise the size of Labour's likely election victory, if you are a Conservative, by being sensible, pragmatic, thoughtful, reassure the markets, reassure homeowners with their mortgages. But one thing, Alastair, to stress, that I disagree with Tim, I agree with most of what he usually says, but the Tories, of course, they'll bounce back. The talk about the Tory party being over is simply not true. The Tory party always bounces back. It's Britain's most successful electoral force. It's one of the world's most
I actually accept that point as well, which is why I mentioned the context of Hague, and sometimes it takes them 10 years, other times it may be sooner. I repeat, I'd be grateful if you came back at 1 o'clock and we'll talk about the constitutionality of it and that mandate which they cling to. But for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks,
Anthony Selden. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with more to come on the programme today. Boris Johnson lands back in London after his holiday in the Caribbean, as speculation grows that he will enter the race, but no official word yet. We'll be getting the latest from our political reporter Olivia Utley next, but first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking cloudy with rain or showers in the north, drier and sunnier in the south. Let's take a look at the details. A cloudy morning and afternoon for northern Scotland with spells of rain or showers. It will be breezy too, especially for Orkney, with daytime temperatures rising to around 14 Celsius. Northern Ireland will likely hang on to the cloud, although the rain should have mostly cleared from central and eastern parts, highs of 15 Celsius. It will be dry with sunny spells across northern England this afternoon, with temperatures hitting highs of 16 Celsius, breezy especially in the west. North Wales will have a largely dry afternoon with some sunny spells, although it will turn cloudier later with the chance of a few showers. A breezy day with highs of 16 Celsius. A fine afternoon for the East Midlands with sunny spells and scattered cloud, turning cloudier from the south later in the afternoon. Mild for the time of the year with highs of 17 Celsius. East Anglia will have a dry afternoon with sunny intervals, although cloud will build from the south later in the afternoon. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs of 17 or 18 Celsius. A cloudy afternoon for southern England with the chance for a few isolated showers. With the wind coming from the south, it will be mild with highs of 17 Celsius. Spells of heavy rain will push up across southern and western parts of the UK through the evening. And that is how the weather is shaping up.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, it's 12:31. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The former Deputy Prime Minister says Rishi Sunak is the first to break the 100 MP threshold required to get on the leadership ballot. The former Chancellor is yet to formally launch his bid for number 10. Yesterday, Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, became the first to announce her campaign to replace Liz Truss. Those vying for the Tory party leadership will have to secure 100 nominations from the party's 357 MPs by Monday. Dominic Raab told GB News he thinks Mr Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is now back in the UK amid speculation he'll run for the leadership. Trade Minister Sir James Duddridge says Mr Johnson told him he's up for running. 68 courts across England and Wales will be affected by staff striking today. Legal advisors and court associates who are members of the Public and Commercial Services Union will walk out for 9 days. The workers are locked in a dispute over a management system that their employer says is key to modernising the court system. Avanti West Coast managers are also striking today in the fourth day of walkouts for the train company this month. The RMT union says the timetable and operating hours will be significantly reduced, with one train an hour running from London to Manchester, Glasgow and Liverpool. It's planning another strike on the 6th of November in an ongoing dispute over working conditions. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. Once again, we're covering the race for the top job at number 10, and we are indeed GB News, and the news just doesn't stop coming. Boris Johnson, as you just heard in Tatiana's bulletin, has arrived back in the United Kingdom after breaking into his holiday in the Caribbean, as the speculation grows that he will indeed enter the leadership contest, but no formal announcement yet. Trade Minister Sir James Duddridge, Dudders as Boris calls him, says that the former Prime Minister told him that he is up for it. It's all very Boris Johnsonian language. Former Chancellor and leadership contender Rishi Sunak has reportedly got to the backing of 100 MPs already. And again, you heard that in Tatiana's news bulletin, just underlining it, because it's a really important issue. You've got to have 100 to go into the final phases of that race. But Penny Mordaunt is the only person who's so far confirmed, and the reports, and that's all they are, is that she's stuck down in the 30s or 40s when it comes to nominations. We can bring you right up to date now with yet more breaking news with our political reporter Olivia Utley, who has snuck elegantly into the studio to bring me up to date. First of all, Tim Montgomery, interestingly talking about borders and law and order. Priti Patel declares.
Absolutely. Priti Patel declaring for Boris Johnson. Also, The Telegraph is reporting that both Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch are considering throwing their weight in behind Boris Johnson. But I think what's quite interesting this morning is that you might expect it to be breaking into the wets and the dries of the Conservative Party, the right of the Conservative Party supporting Boris Johnson and the left of the Conservative Party supporting Rishi Sunak. I don't think that's the case at all.
No.
Lord Frost, who's just declared for Rishi Sunak, is a big Brexiteer, has been exalted by Boris Johnson. He was brought into Boris Johnson's cabinet, of course, and made a lord by Boris Johnson. But he's come out in support for Rishi Sunak. Just now I've seen that Steve Barclay has also come out in support of Rishi Sunak, who was former Brexit minister, big pal of Boris Johnson's. No one could really say that he's on the left of the party.
No.
You've also got Charles Moore declaring for Rishi Sunak, which is huge. I think you were talking
about that was
earlier.
interesting. I don't know if you were able to hear, but my first bit of my conversation with Anthony Seldon, he was saying that really does matter, because who Charles Moore is in the context of the Conservative Party, and the choice of Rishi is not automatic, but it's the politics of picking the grown-up, was the way Seldon put it.
Yes, absolutely. And I used to work at The Telegraph, and it was fascinating to see a lot of our readers were Conservative Party members.
Sure.
And whatever Charles Moore wrote, they were fascinated by it, and we got so many letters about it. Hugely influential figure. And the way he, yes, definitely the grown-up. But also I thought it was quite interesting that Charles Moore, who's always been a big Boris Johnson fan, has defended him to the hilt in all sorts of circumstances, now says that, yes, there might be time for a comeback for him, but the truth is that after COVID, he sort of failed to gain any traction as someone who was competent with running the nation's finances seriously and living within our means. And that's why he seems to have plumped for Rishi Sunak.
Yes.
He feels that that Boris Johnson was far too profligate with the nation's finances. That's
to underline for folk at home, another point that Anthony Seldon made was that it's tricky for Boris Johnson to succeed Liz Truss, who was elected mainly by the members as a state shrinker, tax cutter, when Boris's track record as Prime Minister, forget nonsenses about cakes and stuff like that. I'm serious, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry, not nonsense, that was flip of me. But the really heavy-duty policy stuff was, whenever necessary, expand the state, whenever necessary, raise the taxes to pay for that which needs to be done. That's pretty tricky. And just to add to your list of The Telegraph being an important read today, and that's your former colleague Camilla Tominey, who's going to join us here as a new colleague of yours here at GB News. On the Suella Braverman point, is that there's real anger within the Conservative Party that the right couldn't find a candidate around whom they could unite.
Absolutely, and I think that comes back, as Camilla touches on in her column, to the fact that the right has fractured so much, that you've got two different types of right in the Conservative Party. You've got the state-shrinking, low-tax, Thatcherite economic wing of the party, like Liz Truss, who actually tend to be very socially liberal and aren't too worried about immigration, etc. Then you've got and who sort of see Brexit as an opportunity to go kind of Singapore-on-Thames, make the City of London a massive hub for finance, etc. But then you've got a different kind of right of the Conservative Party, the Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch right of the Conservative Party, which is completely different and is appealing to an electorate in the red wall particularly that isn't actually that bothered about higher taxes. They're prepared for higher taxes if it means more investment in public services and if it means less immigration, etc. So I think it's quite clear why the right hasn't been able to unify a candidate, but definitely...
But it also... now I blow my own little trumpet, because when I was talking to my production team, I said what I really want to talk about today is how the Conservative Party is redefining itself, and if it doesn't redefine itself, it is in deep, deep trouble. So we're on the money with the subject.
Yes, exactly. And I think that... Matt Goodwin's piece, also in the Telegraph this morning, was very interesting about what we were just sort of touching on then, that it's this coalition that Boris put together was actually completely different from what Liz Truss has been fighting for the last 6 weeks. It was about investment in the country and about higher taxes and about cutting down immigration. So how they're going to square these two very different types of politics, it's a real challenge.
It's fascinating. You've agreed to be around for the next couple of hours as well, and therefore you must do what you do so brilliantly, and that is hit the phones again. And I fully expect next time you come in to have another list of great names who've decided to back A, B or C. And, of course, we still haven't got a formal declaration from Boris Johnson or, indeed, from Rishi Sunak. So, for now, Olivia, thank you very much indeed. Talk to you again very, very shortly. Olivia Utley there, one of our excellent GB News political reporters. Indeed, you are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including food and drink prices are the driving force behind that record rise in the cost of living. Inflation back over double figures, over 10%, with households struggling to buy the essentials. But what about the publicans who rely on the sale of food and drink and your noble and welcome custom? We'll be discussing that right next. But first, let's have a quick break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome back. It is 17 minutes to 1 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News TV and radio. Late last night and first thing this morning, I asked you to share your thoughts on our big topic of the day, the Tory leadership, state of the Tory party, state of the nation, if you like. And you have been up and running. Let's get straight into it. Christine says the lack of integrity among Tory MPs is breathtaking. 57 resigned their posts to get rid of Boris Johnson. Dr. Caroline said Johnson would damage the party party and the country, and she's now supporting him. So what's changed? Alison says Boris was ousted for a cake. The police and Sue Gray investigated, yet the kangaroo court called Parliament Privileges Committee have already decided that he's guilty. Not sure that's completely fair, but they certainly want to examine the case, and he says he's up for it. A concerted effort by Rishi Sunak, Labour and the media are to blame. Bring back Boris, she says, which I think are probably the most common 3 words on all of the messages that we've get. And Robert says, if it were a free country, we'd be having an election right now. That's also a very common theme, as I discussed with my guests earlier on, and we'll be going into even greater detail about that at 1 o'clock with the great Sir Anthony Selden, who will be back in. But do keep your views coming in about the candidates, about the state of the Conservative Party, and indeed about the state of the country. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel with all of my previous interviews. We are at GB News. Now, inflation in the United Kingdom's risen to above 10% for the second time this year as families face yet another huge increase in food prices amid the cost of living crisis. The latest figures from the Office for National Statistics, so i.e. they are official grown-up proper figures, show that the Consumer Price Index rose to 10.1% last month, and the prices for food and drink were the sharpest rising factor in that index. So how are businesses coping with those soaring rises in prices themselves, as well as the impact they're having on you as their beloved customers? I am delighted to welcome back to the programme Hugh Osmond, the founder of Punch Taverns and a man who knows as much about the economy and food and drink and retailing as any I know. And there he is. Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Did it surprise you that food was the frightening headline within those frightening inflation numbers?
No, it doesn't. Obviously, we're at quite the sharp end of that. So we see the seafood prices and supply price increase is pretty early on. So we've been seeing this for some time. And to be honest, it was obvious it was going to happen, from the sharp rises in commodity prices, going back several months ago. So, this storm of inflation across utilities and food and what have you is eminently foreseeable and has been coming, for some time. And it has now struck, and it is pretty serious. It's pretty serious for the hospitality industry. It's pretty serious for the person shopping at the supermarket. It is, pretty much across the board. And it's going to be a very scary few months, I think, for a lot of people, a lot of hospitality businesses, but a lot of people who just have to buy food and drink and what have you in supermarkets too.
Very crisp analysis, and exactly why I was hoping that my team could persuade you to come on, because I'm looking at you as someone who runs a business or series of businesses, employs people, reliant upon customers like me and other people. But I'm also looking at someone who's got to pay their food bill and employs staff who've got to pay their food bills as well. If you get hit as an employer and as an entrepreneur and a business person, the bottom line is you're going to have to start closing places down or lay people off. That's what the state of the economy is really so worrying about, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that, I've been in hospitality through previous recessions, and I wouldn't say that means that we know how to cope, because every kind of recession and financial crisis manages to have its own characteristics and be different. But, we're well enough funded and we've been around long enough that we will survive. It is independent owner-operators who don't have reserves who are getting absolutely caned by this. And I'm not sure how a lot of them will get through the next 6 months if things carry on as they are, which I'm afraid they will.
Yeah.
So,
well, interesting you referring to previous recessions, which both of us can remember. What do you make, Hugh, of the current political class, the leadership and the shenanigans that are going on at the moment to lead the Conservative Party and, by dint of that, to lead the country in terms of dealing with that cost of living crisis? And if you were giving them a management review, how would they score?
They wouldn't be in my management, so they wouldn't get a score. But joking apart, I think that the first thing to realise is that the crisis in hospitality, the crisis in the economy, the financial crisis that the Bank of England had to respond to, and the inflationary crisis. The main reason for that, this is nothing as such to do with the mini budget. The main cause, the absolute main cause of this crisis is the response to COVID, shutting down the economy for the thick end of 2 years on and off and spending 500 billion, £500 billion spending on this response while people didn't work. That was always going to have consequences. And it's like going out for the evening, and you have a drink too many, and a number of your friends say don't have another drink, but you stay out. When you wake up in the morning with the mother of all hangovers, you've earned it, and you're going to have to pay the price. And there are things that you can do to help with that hangover. You can take an aspirin, or you can go for a run or walk outside or whatever it is. But ultimately, you can't get rid of the hangover because you earned it. You were out. And if you spend £500 billion and tell the country to stop working for 2 years, and you blow up all the supply chains and you stop production of lots of things and you do all that stuff, then when you reopen the economy, having spunked 500 billion, £500 billion, you are going to get inflation, you are going to get supply shortages, you are going to get supply chain disruption, you are going to get disruption to the NHS, and you are going to have worker shortages. And we have now got all of those things, and we are paying the price for that thing. And it is often ignored. It's blamed on Ukraine, it's blamed on this or that. But the ultimate problem was that we spent money we could not afford on dealing with COVID. We couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford that.
Hugh Osmond, crisp as ever on economics and on the retail sector, but pretty damn crisp there on politics as well. A pleasure to talk to you always. Keep in touch. You're always welcome on the programme. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Hugh Osmond there, the founder of Punch Pubs and Company, who said current political leadership, none of them would be on his management team. Now, we're moving up towards the top of the hour, and I'm utterly thrilled to bits about this next item, because we at home have an Exmoor pony called Dormouse. And if you follow me on social media, you will have seen the shenanigans of Dormouse as I film him running about and misbehaving on my little camera. But my next guest has gone one better than that. You see, now that's Harriet, that belongs to Clemmy. Just wait, and there goes Dormouse, you see, last but not least. We love all of our animals, but Exmoors are real characters, and the truth has been brilliantly captured by my next guest, not on camera, but actually in this lovely, lovely book. Dawn Westcott is the co-founder of the Exmoor Pony Project and has written this book in rhyming style about the life and adventures of a moorland Exmoor foal called Rowan, inspired by her Exmoor ponies and many of the other real-life Exmoor pony characters that she has met. It's aimed at children, rhyming verse, but it's also aimed at adults like us to be aware of an endangered species. It's to help raise funds for the ponies that she's helping coordinate collection of field data for the Equus Survival Trust in the United States, which is providing funding to create DNA profiles and a new database for the breeding herd. How did these incredible, sturdy, brilliant creatures become an endangered species?
I think it all sort of happened towards the end of the Second World War. Unfortunately, they were kind of used as a source of food. There weren't many anyway, and I think the population got reduced down to about 50 ponies and about 6 stallions. So it was a tiny bottleneck of the gene pool that had to be kind of worked up and expanded again.
So what you guys are up to, and I guess we're a part of it as well, is a twin-track strategy, and that is to keep them going. And we've got Dormouse, as you well know, but also to fund research and store DNA. And we had Tullis on talking about a whole range of animals last weekend, talking about the same sort of thing. So it's a twin-track approach. It's to keep those that we're blessed still to have going and in good nick, but also to build up that database and that DNA bank as well.
And it's slightly complicated with Exmoor ponies because you do have a closed stud book with a pedigree population, which is quite small. But because it's closed, you have a population of Exmoor ponies outside of the stud book too, particularly abroad, certainly some of the moorland herds on Exmoor. So there's no way, once they're out of that stud book, if they get missed or a mare that's been missed then breeds...
Is that Exmoor we're looking at the moment?
We're looking at our herd.
Oh, brilliant.
Galloping around the
people tune in on radio as well as on telly, and we're just if you're on radio, you're missing a herd of brilliant Exmoors gallivanting around.
And that's on the way to the pond, so they can have a good splash. But you've got the pedigree herd and the closed stud book, which is recorded and lineage tracked. But this population, which is outside, is lost. So with a tiny endangered population, we obviously need those genetics. And because quite a lot of those ponies are living in their authentic, free-living, semi-feral situations, they're retaining the characteristics and the resilience and robustness of the true Exmoor pony. So this project with the Equus Survival Trust is taking DNA from some of those ponies that are not in the stud book and some of the ponies in the stud book where there are still, delays in getting passports and delays in verifying the parentage of their progeny. So we're just trying to help to do authentication.
It's a brilliant project. The late Queen was a big supporter of endangered breeds and rare breeds, wasn't she?
She loved her native ponies and her mountain and moorland ponies.
Had a mini stud at Balmoral for them, I seem to remember.
Highlands, and she loved her fell ponies. And darling Emma, who stood there, at the funeral, I
remember meeting the woman who ran it for her at Olympia at the horse show there once, and it's the enthusiasm that comes across. Is the official equestrian world behind you and supporting of you?
I think the Rare Breed Survival Trust, which is involved in all of this, yes. Exmoor National Park Authority is absolutely brilliant. North Devon National Trust, which has its own herd at Countersbury, the Foreland herd. Yes, and a good number...
Because to work, it needs to be a collective effort, doesn't it?
It does need to be a collective
that's my field of activity and that's my area.
Yeah.
All right, we've got about a minute left, and I promised my wife, who also loved the book, and you very kindly signed one for Jim Jam, who people, again, who follow me on social media know is my beloved grandson. And the bit my wife said, if Dawn's coming in, you've got to say, this is my favourite bit, because it's a health warning, you see. They're not cuddly, silly little creatures. They are very naughty creatures as well, lovely though they are. Exmoors are nosy. We like to explore, especially if there's a half-open door. A nudge, then a push, and we're in with the feeds. Let's tip over these. Look here, nuts and seeds. It doesn't take long to create such a mess. Soon they come running out in a state of distress. What did they eat? Oh no, call the vet. Don't worry, dear humans. We're not ill just yet. That sums up an Exmoor.
I found 8 Exmoor ponies in our feed store once, and they did create a mess like that. They were the inspiration for that mess.
It was like one of Hugh Osmond's sort of buffet dining options. They do pick and choose. The other thing that we do have a serious problem with, and that is when they live in lovely sunny leafy Hampshire as opposed to on Exmoor, is they don't take to fences terribly well. No. And if a fence is in their line of progress, I fear quite often the fence will go, or they'll go through it, or they'll even go over it.
They can jump like stags. They learn all that out on the moor. They're fantastically agile. Thick, stocky little ponies, but they jump amazingly well. Yeah.
You've got other books with you?
Oh, these are the 3 kind of real-life stories that I wrote beforehand. Yeah.
Oh, The Whispering, Wild Pony Whispering by Dawn as well, worth looking up. In 30 seconds, if people care about this stuff like I do, where do they go? What's the website?
They can buy it at wildponywhispering.co.uk or from my publisher, Halsgrove, or good bookshops.
Brilliant. OK, and so good of you to come in, and good luck with everything and everyone at home. Thinking of you.
Thank you very
thanks
much.
for sharing this, it's a great story.
And
so there we are. It's a lovely, cuddly story, but also it's proper grown-up stuff as well about saving yet another species that we are blessed to enjoy here on Earth. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends as we inch towards 1 o'clock. Lots more still to come on the programme in that second hour, both on my main story of the day, the race to be the next occupant of number 10 Downing Street. It's underway. Boris has landed back in the UK, but has not yet declared, nor has Rishi Sunak, although his people say they've now crossed that magic vital 100 mark. More of that in our second hour, but first, a quick break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome. If you've just joined us, it's just coming up to 1 minute past 1. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. Hello and welcome back if you've been good enough to be with us since 12 o'clock. I am indeed Alastair Stewart and we're into our final hour of the programme, keeping you company on TV and radio with plenty more still to come, including more on our top discussion and more from Sir Anthony Selden, who's in the studio with me now as well as we contemplate this second race to number 10 underway. Penny Mordaunt is the only person who's formally declared. Rishi Sunak's people say that he has the backing of more than 100 Tory MPs, and Boris Johnson is back in the UK, and we are awaiting word from his camp. All of that to discuss, but first let's bring you right up to date with the rest of the news today. Here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Alastair. Good afternoon. It is 1 minute past 1. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The former Deputy Prime Minister says Rishi Sunak is the first to break the 100 MP threshold required to get on the leadership ballot. The former Chancellor has yet to formally launch his bid for number 10. Well, yesterday, Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, became the first to announce her campaign to replace Liz Truss. Those vying for the Tory party leadership will have to secure 100 nominations from the party's 357 MPs by Monday. Dominic Raab told GB News he thinks Mr Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is now back in the UK amid speculation he'll run for leadership. Trade Minister Sir James Duddridge says Mr Johnson told him he's up for running. Well, earlier today, former newspaper editor Neil Wallace told us he thinks Boris Johnson might be more sensible to sit this election out.
The last thing the country needs at the moment is chaos. It needs stability. It doesn't need a complete new uproar, change. It needs calmness. And the danger always is with Boris Johnson, a great vote winner, a clever politician, but the danger is always he's going to come in and just do that.
The leader of the Scottish National Party says Scotland faces economic harm regardless of who the Conservatives choose as the new Prime Minister. Ian Blackford says Scottish independence is the only way to escape the threat of Tory cuts, soaring mortgage rates and record high inflation. His comments follow the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, calling for a general election after Ms Truss's resignation. A planned bus strike by hundreds of workers has been halted following a new pay offer. Around 600 members of Unite at Arriva Kent were set to walk out for 5 days from Monday. If the latest pay offer is rejected, though, the strike action scheduled for Friday the 28th of October will go ahead. 68 courts across England and Wales will be affected by staff striking today. Legal advisors and court associates who are members of the Public and Commercial Services Union will walk out for 9 days. The workers are locked in a dispute over a management system that their employer says is key to modernising the court system. Avanti West Coast managers are also striking today in the fourth day of walkouts for the train company this month. The RMT union says the timetable and operating hours will be significantly reduced, with one train an hour running from London to Manchester, Glasgow and Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned across other rail companies at the start of next month. Avanti is planning another strike on the 6th of November in an ongoing dispute over working conditions. Thousands of victims of infected blood scandal will receive a payment of £100,000 by the end of October. The Cabinet Office has said survivors and bereaved partners will receive letters this week confirming the money will be sent to them in the following 10 days. It follows a report by the Infected Blood Inquiry chairman in July that said the compensation should be paid without delay. Iran has condemned a UN probe into allegations its country's drones are being used for Russia to attack Ukraine. France, Germany and Britain called for the United Nations to investigate the Kremlin's use of alleged Iranian-made drones. It follows claims from US intelligence that Iranian military trainers were in Crimea helping Russian forces operate drones to attack targets in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president is calling on Western nations to urge Russia not to blow up a dam that would see a large-scale disaster in southern Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is planning to blow up the Kakova Dam, which provides Russia with one of the few remaining routes across a river in the partially occupied Kherson region. And Italy's new leader has been officially sworn in and makes her the country's first female prime minister. Giorgia Meloni swept to victory in an election last month as part of a coalition that includes Forza Italia, led by former Premier Silvio Berlusconi. Meloni has stressed her administration would be firmly pro-NATO and pro-European. The new alliance is the first far-right-led government in Italy since the Second World War. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, Alastair, it's back to you.
Tatiana, thanks very much indeed. So we're back where we were just over a month ago. Yet another leadership contest. Boris Johnson's arrived back in the UK after his holiday in the Caribbean, as the speculation grows that he will indeed enter the leadership contest. Former Chancellor and himself former leadership contender Rishi Sunak has reportedly now got the backing of more than 100 MPs, and that's the threshold for being guaranteed a place in the runoff for leadership. Penny Mordaunt is the only person who's formally declared that she is standing, but her numbers are not so good. Now, we're going to keep abreast of all of that. Any breaking news, any other runners and riders, we will bring you up to date on that. That's what Olivia Utley is doing right now, and she'll be back in the studio. I'm also delighted to say that back in the studio with me again, as promised, is Sir Anthony Seldon, the former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Buckingham, but also renowned political biographer, Thatcher, Major, and all the rest of them. We were talking about the state of the Conservative Party, which I'm going to park to a degree, unless you want to weave it into your answers to any of my specific questions. But I want to talk about the state of the UK, how we're seen internationally, and also the state of our constitution. And in terms of how we are seen internationally, Moody's, the credit rating organisation, has reduced our credit rating overnight to now a bit risky. The international press is even crueler. France's Le Figaro said trusts weaken the country's image internationally. Italy's Chiara della Sierra joked that Great Britain seems to have fallen into political instability. I mean, we used to joke, our generation did, about, oh, you know, he's the Prime Minister of Italy because it's his turn. I mean, that is worrying for our standing as one of the great economies and indeed one of the great democracies of the world, is it not?
It is, absolutely. I mean, it's always hard to tell, isn't it, what today's headlines that can become tomorrow's fish and chip paper. But so we can exaggerate the extent of these headlines, but it does seem that in the United States, their view of Britain at the moment is this is the worst crisis of credibility for 50 years. And that view is replicated broadly, and it's replicated in the markets, and it's replicated in that credit valuation there. So, you know, this is bad, and it could get worse. I think that is the key point, Alastair, that wherever we are now, we might not be at the worst. If, for example, Boris Johnson came back and he has no credibility as somebody who is able to have a firm grip on the country's finances for all his many and considerable qualities, sure. That isn't it. Sure. So unless they produce somebody who really is credible, that will increase the impetus for a general election, and that will just be more stability. Yeah.
And the interesting thing that struck me reading through that list as well was the notion of soft diplomacy and leadership, that the United Kingdom, not least under Boris Johnson, to be fair, has made phenomenal progress in rallying an alliance against Putin over his invasion of Ukraine and bringing slightly reluctant people onto the dance floor like France and Germany. You've got to have status and you've got to have respect to be able to do that. And here we are waiting for China's next move over Taiwan.
Absolutely. There's a real political and military hole at the moment in this country. Boris Johnson found it difficult as Foreign Secretary to establish a post-Brexit role for Britain. And in his first 2 years as Prime Minister, he found that difficult also. Ukraine, if you like, came to his rescue, and it brought out the very best in him, as happens with leadership. Yeah. There's an element of luck. Is the crisis the right one for you? Gordon Brown with the global financial crisis, he wasn't doing so well on other things, but that was something that he could do well on, as was Ukraine. And the quality of his leadership was unquestionably pugnacious and strong, showed up other nations. Again, we can be a little Englander here and see how it looks here. From a global perspective, the leadership isn't quite as important as we might think it is. Nevertheless, he was right. He was on the right side of that war. Now, what's happened since he's gone? Liz Truss had no credibility as a Foreign Secretary. We have a Foreign Secretary with no credibility as a Foreign Secretary. We need serious grown-ups in that job. Whoever wins needs to put in somebody.
And fascinating in that context and that analysis that Ben Wallace, the Secretary of State for Defence, who did not run in the contest that Liz Truss, who we've just seen on television there, won over Rishi Sunak, but came out yesterday in support of Boris Johnson, leaning towards him, he said, as the candidate. Final point, and it's not so much about the Conservative Party, it is about the Constitution, whether we're a laughing stock or not. You said in our first conversation, and one of my other guests said it as well, is we have a system no, it was Marco said it, we have a system that people are genuinely envious of, and yet this lot are only going through yet another leadership contest because they're clinging to a majority they got in 2019. Is the Constitution and our democracy fit for purpose?
Yes, but the way that it's being done, the job of Prime Minister is proving impossible because the way that the incumbents choose to do it, the Constitution is proving difficult because of the way that people are choosing to do it. So the civil service is denigrated now by 3 Prime Ministers in a row. That's a kind of Ratner kind of way of dealing, because you are the chief executive. I mean, if it isn't that great, then what are the Tories? Why haven't they sorted it out in 12 years?
But they are playing it straight by the rules.
They are. We have a great constitution. It is much envied. Parliament gave itself to many countries around the world. Our civil service, the office of Prime Minister, now 300 years old. I'm trying to create the museum of the Prime Minister, because we don't know in this country.
Oh, I'd support that.
We give it to the rest of the world, but we don't celebrate it in this country.
I'm going to end in a curious segue to it, having just had a lovely conversation about a book about ponies, and I don't know if the camera can see this. This is in the excellent Saturday Review of the Times newspaper, and it said, I found myself without a wife, job or home, so I walked the Western Front. It's Anthony's latest book, and it is an extraordinary... We have actually talked about it. He won't mind my sharing that. But of that book, The Path of Peace, Sebastian Faulks, great novelist in his own right, and a man who has touched war with great style and aplomb, says... It is the simplest and fittest memorial yet to the agony of the Great War. Selden's account of how he walked it and what it means to all of us will be an inspiration to younger generations. OK, here's the segue.
Yeah.
We need to inspire that younger generation not only about the agonies and horrors of war, but the merits of politics and leadership and government. The best and brightest of this generation wouldn't touch it with a barge pole.
We're on the same page, Alastair. It goes back to school, doing things properly in school, inducing a sense of service to others. Our politicians, one after another, have forgotten that. It's too much about me, with our Prime Minister's a sense of pride, loyalty to each other, to the nation. And this walk, the Western Front Way, and the book, The Path of Peace, which talks about the creation of what is now the world's biggest commemoration project. Anyone can walk it or cycle the Western Front Way. The Path of Peace talks about how it was a vision of service and loyalty and walking side by side with other people in the interest of building trust and peace between people of different backgrounds, faiths, nationalities. It's an inspiring vision of this soldier. It was a privilege for me to walk it 1,000 kilometres, 1 million steps through soil where 10 million, Alastair, had bled often to their death. Every step I took, 10 soldiers had either died or bled seriously. I mean, it was an extraordinary walk, the Path of Peace, the Western Front Way from Switzerland to the North Sea. And that's what talking about there.
Well, I hope it goes well. It deserves to, and I do hope you get the Museum of Prime Ministership off the ground ASAP. It is genuinely always a pleasure to talk with you, in private or on air. I hope you'll keep in touch and that we'll talk again very soon.
Thanks, Alastair.
So Anthony Selden there. So read the political biographies, cause they're brilliant, but also read that about the Western Front. Deeply moving, as Anthony just made clear. Now, his great thoughts, those earlier on in the programme from the great Tim Montgomery and Marco Longhi. We were also very keen to find out what regional Conservative leaders think of what's going on for the leadership of the UK party, as it were. So I'm particularly thrilled to be rejoined by someone who I've always enjoyed chatting to on this programme. That's the chairman of the Northern Ireland Conservatives, Matthew Robinson. Matthew, great for you to come back again. Do you recognise your party right now?
Great to be back with you, Alastair. I mean, let's not hide from it. It's been a pretty challenging few weeks for the party. There's no escaping that. I would say I thought Liz Truss handled herself with grace and poise in that resignation speech, probably one of the most difficult things she's ever had to do in her life, and in the interest not just of the party, but more importantly of the country. Clearly, Liz Truss made a calculation to step aside. I thought it was unfortunate the way things turned out. I supported Liz Truss in the leadership election, but I think the party owes her a huge debt in the manner in which she stepped aside in the greater interest of the party and the country.
The only looking forward, she stepped down. You know as well, let me just, the only reason she'd stepped down, and you know this just as well as I do, is that the chairman of the party and, more importantly, the chairman of the executive of the 22 committee told her that she'd lost the support of the Conservative Parliamentary Party. Not you in Northern Ireland necessarily, not your colleagues and friends in Wales who I'm going to be talking to next, but the MPs did for her. Would you like to have seen her stay on and fight the fight?
I certainly would have supported her if Liz Truss sought to remain in office and try and rally a unit, which I think you saw the early beginnings of, to try and put a cabinet together with all talents from the party. But there's no point looking back. It is what it is. We have to look forward now. There's a vacancy. But I think you raise a good point. This is the balance with the Conservative and Unionist Party. Of course, it's important that our leader enjoys the confidence of their parliamentary colleagues in Westminster, but they've also got to enjoy the confidence of the activists, the worker bees in the party, those that give up their own time to knock on doors to campaign for candidates, the voluntary party. And that's why I think it's important the membership have a say on the final two. Obviously, as been prescribed this time, it's going to be a slightly shortened campaign. I think that's welcome. It's going to be a purely online ballot for members, but I think it's so important that members have a say. Yeah. But let's look back to the summer. It wasn't the membership of the Conservative Party that wanted Boris Johnson to leave as leader. It was the Parliamentary Party. So I think now looking forward, we've got some really interesting candidates. Yeah, I would say I think while Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak haven't formally declared, I think it's looking that way. Obviously, Penny Morton has as well. But all three are very qualified. And what I don't like, and you've seen a little bit of this, are snide comments about certain candidates. You know, I subscribe to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, the 11th commandment of, thou shalt not speak ill of a fellow Tory. And I don't think we get anywhere in this shortened contest by attacking any of the potential candidates. They're all incredibly qualified. I think all three would make potentially great party leaders and prime ministers, as Boris Johnson obviously has already demonstrated not so long ago.
Fascinating. We will watch this space, and you didn't come out, but I think you got quite close to Boris. But we shall see and watch this. And when you finally resolve the matter, come back on the show, particularly that vital point about the membership not having a bigger say this time as they did last time. I really think that story will run and run. But for the time being, Matthew Robinson there in Northern Ireland, a genuine pleasure always, and thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. Matthew is the chairman of the Conservatives in Northern Ireland, and from Northern Ireland, as promised, we head to Wales, and I'm delighted to be joined by the chairman of the Vale of Glamorgan Conservatives, Leighton Rowlands, back onto the programme again. Great to see you as well. You were, last time we spoke, first time round as it were, you were a Penny Mordaunt supporter. She's declared, but it's not going as well as I'm sure she and perhaps you would like at the moment. What needs to be done to give her that boost?
Thank you, Alastair, for having me back. And it's always a pleasure to come and speak to you. I did support Penny Mordaunt originally. Unfortunately, she didn't get down to the final two. And I'm pleased that she's put her name forward again and is declared again. Though we'll see what the MPs are, who haven't declared yet, see where they're going. But she did a fantastic filling in for Liz Truss for that urgent question by the Labour Party. And I think she just needs to stick by her guns, say that she's the united candidate.
How fascinating. The other thing I remember very clearly you and I talking about last time, and to be fair to them, it is true also of Suella and Kemi, Penny was one of those candidates who was a fresh start. Give it some fundamental thought. Sir Anthony Selden said on the programme a wee while ago, the Tory party is not in its death throes because the Tory party always bounces back, but it does need to ask itself some pretty profound questions. So as I said to Matthew, I'll say the same to you. Do you as an activist, a worker bee as Matthew put it, do you recognise your party as it stands at the moment?
I would say, I do recognise my party as it stands at the moment, but we do need to unite as members from the voluntary party and the professional party as well, but also the parliamentary party. Without the activists here at the grassroots, all those MPs wouldn't got elected, we wouldn't be able to form a government. So, what we need to do is unite as one behind a candidate and make sure the country is stable. I wouldn't endorse a general election right now. We don't need one right now. We need to stabilise the country and then go, in January 2025.
Do you think that unity that both you and Matthew before you spoke so eloquently about is possible if the membership of the party, unlike last time, are, in my words, not anybody else's, not Graham Brady's words, but that in effect marginalised? The grown-ups will tell you who the two are that you can choose between, and you have a final say at the very end of it.
In relation to that, I think, at the end of the day, it's the parliamentary, the way our constitution is, the parliamentary chooses, the final two. That's always been the case, and then it comes down to the membership where we can, decide out of the final two. I think it's only right that they are the Prime Minister or the leader of the Conservative Party is the leader of the MPs, but also the voluntary party, and we can unite, behind any of the three candidates. As Matthew said, they're all very able candidates. They're all very good parliamentarians. So, I would be happy, if Penny didn't get to the 100 nominations, I would be happy with either Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson.
OK, interesting, but not declaring yet. You still want more argument to be... I mean, one of my big problems with all of my guests we've been making clear is you have to scratch your head to last time to remember what Rishi stands for and what he doesn't stand for, and you have to go back even further on Boris Johnson. But you're not tempted to say, I, Leighton Rowlands, hereby declare for Boris or for Rishi, or you're sticking with Penny with your fingers crossed. Is that right?
I would say I'm sticking with Penny with my fingers crossed. But as you remember, when Penny didn't get to the final two, I supported Rishi Sunak. Yes. So I'll be happy with any of the three who put their name forward.
You're a good man and an honest man and a consistent man. How on earth do you get on in politics, Leighton? It must be terribly challenging for you. Great to talk to you again. Keep in touch, and very happy to talk to you again. Thank you very much indeed. That's Leighton Rowlands there, who is the chair of the Vale of Glamorgan Conservatives. So brilliant insights from Northern Ireland, and then brilliant insights there from Wales. And thanks very much indeed to both of them for finding time to join us here on GB News. We are 25 minutes past 1 now, so we've got 35 minutes or so left, and we've plenty more still to come within that 35 minutes after the break, as the Conservative Party seeks its third leader in 6 months. Voters across the country consider the prospect of an early general election. Our East Midlands reporter's been speaking to the people of Grantham, which may ring a bell for some of you, but first let's take a quick look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking cloudy with rain or showers in the north, drier and sunnier in the south. Let's take a look at the details. A cloudy morning and afternoon for northern Scotland with spells of rain or showers. It will be breezy too, especially for Orkney, with daytime temperatures rising to around 14 Celsius. Northern Ireland will likely hang on to the cloud, although the rain should have mostly cleared from central and eastern parts, highs of 15 Celsius. It will be dry with sunny spells across northern England this afternoon, with temperatures hitting highs of 16 Celsius, breezy especially in the west. North Wales will have a largely dry afternoon with some sunny spells, although it will turn cloudier later with the chance of a few showers. A breezy day with highs of 16 Celsius. A fine afternoon for the East Midlands with sunny spells and scattered cloud, turning cloudier from the south later in the afternoon. Mild for the time of the year with highs of 17 Celsius. East Anglia will have a dry afternoon with sunny intervals, although cloud will build from the south later in the afternoon. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs of 17 or 18 Celsius. A cloudy afternoon for southern England with the chance for a few isolated showers. With the wind coming from the south, it will be mild with highs of 17 Celsius. Spells of heavy rain will push up across southern and western parts of the UK through the evening. And that is how the weather is shaping up.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
and from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, it's 1:30. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The former Deputy Prime Minister says Rishi Sunak is the first to break the 100 MP threshold required to get on the leadership ballot. The former Chancellor is yet to formally launch his bid for number 10. Yesterday, Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, became the first to announce her campaign to replace Liz Truss. Those vying for the Tory party leadership will have to secure 100 nominations from the party's 357 MPs by Monday. Dominic Raab told GB News he thinks Mr Sunak is the best person for the job.
I think he is, both on economic but also on those critical issues of public trust, the best place to get the government and fundamentally the country moving forward. The trust that the public have in the leader matters, and that's why I think Rishi is best placed to deliver in the national interest.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is now back in the UK amid speculation he'll run for leadership. Trade Minister Sir James Duddridge says Mr Johnson told him he's up for running. 68 courts across England and Wales will be affected by staff striking today. Legal advisors and court associates who are members of the Public and Commercial Services Union will walk out for 9 days. The workers are locked in a dispute over management system that their employer says is key to modernising the court system. Avanti West Coast managers are also striking today in the fourth day of walkouts for the train company this month. The RMT union says the timetable and operating hours will be significantly reduced, with one train an hour running from London to Manchester, Glasgow and Liverpool. It's planning another strike on the 6th of November in an ongoing dispute over working conditions. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now, Alastair, it's over to you.
Tatiana, thank you very much indeed. So, as the Conservative Party seeks its third leader in 6 months, voters across the country consider the prospects of an early general election. The next chance for the British public to pick a Prime Minister directly can't happen any later than January 2025. After serving the shortest term as Prime Minister in UK politics, the self-styled Thatcherite Liz Truss now prepares to take her place in history. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has been to Grantham, of course the birthplace of Margaret Thatcher, to see if the Tories could ever be toppled in that seat.
Liz Truss may be leaving, but the mess she's leaving behind won't quickly wash away. Martin's been cleaning windows for 40 years and following politics for even longer. He says he's never seen a job done so poorly.
Chancellor of the Exchequer seems to change every couple of weeks. Prime Minister, it's the fourth one we've had now, or third one we've had in a couple of months. You lose faith with British politics and the British government.
In Grantham, the birthplace of Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady's legacy proves tough to imitate. Liz Truss lasted just 44 days as Prime Minister before resigning, the shortest term in British history. A disastrous low-tax, high-growth policy spooked markets and spiked mortgage rates. Now, a new Tory leadership contest and soon Prime Minister. Labour calls for an election. Patrick owns a small cafe. A lifelong Conservative voter, he's now considering his loyalties.
We've lost all faith with the Conservative Party. They're all bickering. They're not a solid unit anymore. They're not representing what the mandates that their policies should be, looking after businesses, looking after hard, honest, decent workers and reducing taxation.
Sue and Colleen back Boris for PM. They've done it before, for Brexit, but in an election would turn to old habits.
I normally do vote Labour and working class, but I voted because I believe that Boris would get us out of the EU.
He did a bad thing, but he's probably learnt now and does a right thing. I don't really know, but I would still vote Labour.
Grantham has a strong Conservative hold of 26,000 votes. In fact, every single constituency in Lincolnshire has a Conservative MP. But right now, the polls tip firmly in the favour of Labour. And whether a general election is in 6 months or 2 years, those odds must be terrifying, even for the Conservative heartlands.
It is embarrassing, yes. And we should be embarrassed and say sorry for what's gone on. But we are the party in power, and it'd be wrong to have a general election now. And the important thing to do is get sensible heads, calm, experienced heads, in a cabinet of talents, led by somebody with experience.
Britain's next Prime Minister inherits a colossal task, uniting the country ahead of the hardest winter for a generation. Thatcher spent 15 years as Tory leader. Liz Truss fell before the last of autumn's leaves. Will Hollis for GB News in Grantham.
Fascinating stuff from a fascinating place there. Time for emails. Now, this is not on my script. This one just coming to me from a very good friend of mine, Mike Love, who actually used to work for Margaret Thatcher, funnily enough. And he says, I was surprised to just hear you say that we can pick the Prime Minister directly come 2025. As you know, we have the name of a local candidate on our ballot papers, not the leaders. The PM is not an elected role other than by the members of the largest party come that election. Mike, you are spot on. Slip of the tongue from me. me, for which I apologise. Mea culpa. Now, this is on my script, and I'm delighted to say thank you, Helen, for getting in touch. I voted for my local Conservative MP, Mike Love's point in a way, with the view of getting Boris into power in 2019. He has the mandate from the British people. Our vote has been ignored thus far by MPs who ousted him ousted him, the man we put into place. Let them remember that we can and will remove them. Boris for PM, says Helen. Adrian says, we want Boris Johnson. He's the only person with a mandate from the British people. Don says it's a stitch-up. My bet is Stitchy Rishi gets the job unopposed on Monday. We've got lots more still to come. I promise faithfully I will get more in if I can before we come off air at 2 o'clock. It's now 23 minutes to that magic moment, so do stick with us and keep the views coming in. The better they are, the more likely we are to read them out. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're at GB News for all of the interviews that you may have missed or want to hear back again. You are indeed watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News, with plenty more still to come in our final half hour, including retail sales in Great Britain fell more steeply than expected last month, as we had in that brilliant conversation. We troweled into that with Hugh Osman. But as consumers rein in their spending, those prices continue to soar. According to the Office for National Statistics, September marks the first month that volumes have fallen below pre-pandemic levels. I'll be discussing that with retail champion Claire Bailey about the future, the very future indeed, of the high street. But first, a quick break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome back. It is precisely 19 minutes to 2. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. I was just saying before that quick break, British shoppers cut their spending sharply last month. We have little choice, but the economic impact is so huge. As the penny literally drops, we are simply spending less. But for the sector, it's potentially a disaster. The supermarkets are also feeling the pain, with Tesco, for example, upping the price of its meal deals yet again. Well, joining me now is Claire Bailey, who is the retail champion, and always great to see you there. I mean, it's intriguing, isn't it? Because as Hugh Osman was just saying, it's not just price reaction to it, but they're turning away and putting the sector itself, the high street, his restaurants, in jeopardy.
Yes, absolutely. I've got some figures in front of me, actually, that are really quite telling. We've seen that although sales were not too badly affected, the actual volume of goods purchases dropped by over 6%, which suggests, obviously, that if we're spending as much or slightly less, but getting considerably less, prices, obviously, as we know, have gone up. But what also is extremely worrying about the inflation figures at the moment is the retail price index, which is obviously inflation values, is used from September to calculate the increase in business rates the following April. So as Helen Dickinson, the chief executive of the British Retail Consortium, posted on LinkedIn yesterday, said there is an £8 million increase in the the rates bill that retailers in high street premises will face. And whilst retail
I didn't know that, and that is simply the ridiculous tax that those people have to pay to trade.
Exactly. So they're only 5% of the economy, but they support 25% of the business rates because retail property is highly rated. So to add £800 million to a sector that is already under enormous pressure, where people are struggling to spend, where there's supply chain issues and everything else, it does alarm a lot of people. And I guess that what the British Retail Consortium and people like myself are doing are calling on the government to really put a pause on increasing the business rates, because with energy bills and consumer confidence and everything else, these businesses are not going to be able to afford to trade.
Well, to be fair, and I'm a man totally for balance, as people well know, is that actually the Labour Party are ahead of the Conservative Party on that issue at the moment, as was made clear at their conference. But I tell you the other thing that I find fascinating, and it's purely anecdotal, and you are an expert in anecdotal evidence and referred to it at the beginning of the conversation about volumes and what have you. An awful lot of people I talk to are turning away from the high street because of those prices, and they are taking themselves to farmers' markets. They're joining wholesale clubs. I mean, that may help them with their own budgets, but it does mean ultimately the high street could be for the chop.
Well, there has been a lot of talk about the so-called death of the high street in the media for well over 10 years. I mean, go back to when David Cameron appointed Mary Portas to do the reviews. That's a long time ago now. And yet you look at the high street from an architectural and geographical point of view, it's existed for 300 plus years as an entity. We had market traders outside of houses. They then moved the market stall into the ground floor of the house and they lived upstairs. Upstairs then became office accommodation. So there's ebbs and flows over hundreds of years of history that says the high street is a vital part of the community. However, what has happened within those high streets has changed over the years according to the needs and wants of people. We saw people massively migrate away from high streets, living to out of town, and now we're seeing empty premises being repurposed back into accommodation to put residents back into the heart of our towns and city centres. So I think we will never see the high street die, but it is certainly going to have to evolve. It has to evolve. We can't continue the way we are. And people are much more focused on supporting local. So the farm shops, the wholesalers, the food community groups and so on are a part of the way that we are changing the nature of our shopping habits.
And the big shout-out warning, anyone who's been lucky enough to be across there on holiday or any other form of tourism, is the United States of America. You go downtown in any big US city and it's ghastly.
I think I'd refer to the UK more like European cities because towns
fingers
we're
crossed.
very densely populated. But we do need to see more investment to things like our social infrastructure, our community infrastructure, and this space that was allocated for retail repurposed into something that adds value to communities, not just commercial value, but social value.
Yeah. And a big shout out there, just to repeat it, because it really does matter to those people who are just trying to make a living, providing you and me with what we need. Business rates do need looking at, otherwise we're going to lose even more shops. Claire, it's always an informative pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for breaking into your Saturday afternoon to spend time with us. Claire Bailey, the retail champion, waving the flag there with her normal aplomb. Now, today up to 1,000 people are set to join workers, local politicians and union reps on a march to save Doncaster Sheffield Airport. The airport's owners, the Peel Group, are winding down operations from the 31st of October and made the decision to close permanently due to its financial viability, or in reality, lack thereof. It's estimated that 2,700 jobs will be impacted by that closure, and as well as providing commercial flights to passengers, the airport also provides a base for crucial emergency services and national security functions. Didn't know that. Well, talks have been underway this week to see if the airport can remain open after Peel Group were offered £7 million by the South Yorkshire Mayor to underwrite losses for the next 13 months until another viable buyer can be found. Did it work? Will it work? Anna Riley is all over the story for us and joins us live now. Anna, any biters, any takers from the Peel Group?
Good afternoon, Alastair. Well, those talks are still underway, so we don't know yet if they're going to accept that offer from the South Yorkshire Mayor, but it's certainly something that people here want saving. The airport is South Yorkshire's only airport. It's before the pandemic, 1.5 million passengers were coming here per year. There's still flights going out today. There's been 8 flights today. They're winding down at the end of the month, though, if the airport isn't saved. And as well as the South Yorkshire Mayor trying to save the airport, the local MP for Don Valley, Conservative Nick Fletcher, has also been fighting to save the airport. I spoke to him earlier and this is what he had to say.
The airport is such a hive of business around this area. The plans that were first laid out for it are fantastic plans. They're still out there. People are ever so fond of it. They love using it. Now it'd be really, really poor for the area. It's such a wonderful asset to have. There's 800 jobs here, and I know the Department of Work and Pensions has been working really closely with them, as Doncaster Council has, so that these people can get back into the job market. And there's offers come from other airports too. But it's the 2,700 jobs to the wider community that will be lost from Doncaster, and that is really quite sad. Yeah, I do think there should be a public inquiry into it. I do think that people need to know why an asset like this has not been viable. And I think the only way we're actually going to achieve that and really get to the nitty-gritty of it is to actually find out through a public inquiry.
And that's something that Nick Fletcher is going to be debating in Parliament on Monday. There's an adjournment debate where he'll be giving a speech on why he feels it's so vital for this airport to be saved. And Monday is going to be a big day in politics, isn't it, with the leadership race. I asked the MP who he wanted to be the leader of the party, and this is what he said.
I'll be making my mind up on Monday.
So personally, can we push you leaning in the way of anybody as yet?
No, not at this moment in time. I'm keeping my cards close to my chest. It's important. It's an important decision for this constituency. It's an important decision for Doncaster, and it's an important decision for the country. It's it's a difficult time. I understand that, but I think both are the main candidates at the moment, which appear to be Rishi and Boris. Whoever wins, whoever I back, but whoever wins, I will 100% get behind them.
So that's certainly a big story that we'll be covering on Monday on GB News, and I'll also be providing updates on the airport closure and whether or not it is saved.
Brilliant stuff there, Anna, and I'm glad you said both, because we want you to keep close to those talks that, as you said quite rightly, are continuing with the Peel Group, because 2,700 jobs in the current climate are not to be sniffed at. Let's keep our fingers crossed that something can happen there. Anna Ryler, always a pleasure. Thank you very, very much indeed. So we move into the very final phase of our programme with the continuing headline that Boris Johnson has indeed landed back in the United Kingdom after flying back from his Caribbean holiday in the expectation of launching a bid to replace Liz Truss in Downing Street as Prime Minister again, just weeks after he left office in a mire of scandal. I'm delighted now to be joined by an old chum of mine, Stanley Johnson, former member of the European Parliament, environmental campaigner. You know the rest, and there he is. Why on earth would he want to put himself through that again, Stanley?
Well, lovely to be here again, Alastair. Very nice, and I loved your story about the Exmoor ponies. I'm speaking from Exmoor as I talk to you now. Why would Boris want to do it? Well, because there are things he promised to do. There are things the Conservative Party promised to do in 2019 when we won won the election. Some of those things have not been done. Some have been done. So he wants to, I think, finish unfinished business. Now, Alistair, I'm speaking to you, as I mentioned, from Exmoor. I'm speaking to you actually as a potential voter. I'm about to hold up to you. You see what this is? This says Certificate of Membership of the Conservative Party. It says Stanley Johnson, you are a member, and it's signed, would you believe it, by Boris Johnson, which says Prime Minister and Leader of the Conservative Party. If I look inside, it says you can choose your candidates and vote in the leadership election. I'm really pleased. I look at this and I say, who am I going to vote for? I have no idea whether Boris is going to be a candidate. You perhaps know more than I do. But what I will do is say I am looking for a candidate who will be very strong on environmental issues, will be very strong on the need to bring us back closer to Europe, and will also be strong on some of these international issues like net zero and so on and so forth. So these are the things I'm looking for. And of course, not everybody's going to meet all these requirements, but that's what I'm looking for. And I do believe that Boris, on his record, meets a lot of that. I would very much like to see him move much closer now. He perhaps is uniquely qualified to bring us back into a proper relationship with the EU than others might be.
Well, no, I have to say I know no more than you at the moment as to whether or not he will be running. His former parliamentary private secretary, James Judridge, was saying, yes, he's up for it and all the rest of it. But we did report a moment ago that Rishi Sunak, the guy who many accuse within your party of having stabbed your son both in the back and the front, forcing him out of office, or at least began that process going, has now passed the 100 mark. And a lot of people getting in touch with GB News are saying it's a stitch-up. Do you fear it might be a stitch-up, Stanley?
Well, a stitch-up for whom? I remember when Boris
Rishi Sunak.
It seems only the other day, he made a wonderful image which was, well, my defenestration is the biggest stitch-up since the Bayer tapestries. I don't know what kind of stitch-up we're thinking. Richie may have 100 votes, but I think, as you said, there are 367 votes going. Who knows? There's certainly a scope for one or even two other candidates to be up there in the final three.
You said that there was unfinished business, but if Boris does win, and it is crystal clear from, and okay, it's GB News, so it's slightly self-selecting, but overwhelmingly that is the instinct of our viewers and listeners from emails and from messages. I go back to my first point. He's still going to have to put himself in the eye of a storm, whether it's the Privileges Committee or the rest of it. If I was him, he's got a fabulous wife, he's got fabulous kids, he can command a huge fee on the after-dinner lecture circuit. I just don't see why he'd want to go through all of that again.
I think you make the point so tremendously well. With all that, why would he want to go through it again? Because he believes that there are things to do still. Now, I sound as though I'm parroting myself here, but when Liz Truss, when talking about growth, I kept on saying to her, come on, talk about sustainable growth, the thing which gives a good economy and a good environment and looks after the future as well. Now, I do believe Boris got that message. And for example, you take the energy issue. He was brilliant on Ukraine. That's about the biggest thing you can think of. Do that, get these international alliances going, and you will bring down the cost of energy. If you get peace in Ukraine, good heavens, energy prices will drop immediately. So I think he is the man. Yes, there may be all these other temptations, but the test of the man here is he's ready to give those temptations up, to endure the slings and arrows. You know, I won't name these journalists because, you know, we don't throw them out, as you say.
Slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. We've got 30 seconds, Stanley. Go on. You've got the form there in front of you. Is it your prediction, one, that your son will put his name forward, and B, do you think he can beat Rishi Sunak in a head-to-head?
Well, I think he will put his name forward, and I think he will beat Rishi Sunak in a head-to-head. And I want to say, because I'm now going to reveal this for the first time, when I get my vote, my electronic password, I will be voting for Boris, because I think he will do the things I care about: Europe, environment, peace in our time, and net zero.
Stanley Johnson, always a pleasure, genuinely. Enjoy the book. It's called Rowan, all about Exmoor, and you have a lovely weekend down there. Thank you very much indeed. Stanley Johnson, dad of Boris. That's all we have time for. Back again at 12 o'clock tomorrow. Hope you can join me. Now let's give you a peek at what sort of weather you can expect for the rest of this lovely weekend.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking cloudy with rain or showers in the north, drier and sunnier in the south. Let's take a look at the details. A cloudy morning and afternoon for northern Scotland with spells of rain or showers. It will be breezy too, especially for Orkney, with daytime temperatures rising to around 14 Celsius. Northern Ireland will likely hang on to the cloud, although the rain should have mostly cleared from central and eastern parts, highs of 15 Celsius. It will be dry with sunny spells across northern England this afternoon, with temperatures hitting highs of 16 Celsius, breezy especially in the west. North Wales will have a largely dry afternoon with some sunny spells, although it will turn cloudier later with the chance of a few showers. A breezy day with highs of 16 Celsius. A fine afternoon for the East Midlands with sunny spells and scattered cloud, turning cloudier from the south later in the afternoon. Mild for the time of the year with highs of 17 Celsius. East Anglia will have a dry afternoon with sunny intervals, although cloud will build from the south later in the afternoon. Feeling pleasant in the sunshine with highs of 17 or 18 Celsius. A cloudy afternoon for southern England with the chance for a few isolated showers. With the wind coming from the south, it will be mild with highs of 17 Celsius. Spells of heavy rain will push up across southern and western parts of the UK through the evening. And that is how the weather is shaping up.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been